Hi Pine class, it is Tuesday afternoon story time and we were 2/3 of the way through chapter 12, so we're going to finish chapter 12 today. It was almost impossible to believe that this man was about to injure me physically and in cold blood. As I lifted my left hand palm upwards and held it there, I looked at the palm itself and the pink skin and the fortune teller's lines running over it. And I could still not bring myself to imagine that anything was going to happen to it. The long white cane went up high in the air and came down on my hand with a crack like a rifle going off. I heard the crack first, and about 2 seconds later I felt the pain. Never had I felt a pain such as that in my whole life. It was as though someone were pressing a red-hot poker against my palm and holding it there. I remember grabbing my injured left hand with my right hand and ramming it between my legs and squeezing my legs together against it. I squeezed and squeezed as hard as I could, as if I were trying to stop the hand from falling to pieces. I managed not to cry out loud, but I couldn't keep the tears from pouring down my cheeks. From somewhere nearby, I heard another fearful swish crack, and I knew that poor Sydney had got it as well. But oh, that fearful, searing, burning pain across my hand. Why didn't it go away? I glanced at Sydney. He was doing just the same as me, squeezing his hand between his legs and making the most awful face. "Go and sit down, both of you," Captain Lancaster ordered. We stumbled back to our desks and sat down. "Now get on with your work," the dreaded voice said. "And let us have no more cheating, no more insolence either." The class bent their heads over their books like people in church saying their prayers. I looked at my hand. There was a long, ugly mark about 1/2 an inch wide running right across the palm, just where the fingers joined the hand. It was raised up in the middle, and the raised part was pure white with red on both sides. I moved the fingers. They moved all right, but it hurt to move them. I looked at Sydney. He gave me a quick, apologetic glance under his eyelids, then went back to his sums. When I got home from school that afternoon, my father was in the workshop. "I've brought the raisins," he said. "We will now put them in to soak. Fetch me a bowl of water, Danny." I went over to the caravan and got a bowl and half filled it with water. I carried it to the workshop and put it on the bench. "Open up the packets and tip them all in," my father said. This was one of the really nice things about my father. He didn't take over and want to do everything himself. Whether it was a difficult job like adjusting a carburettor in a big engine, or whether it was simply tipping some raisins into a basin, he always let me go ahead and do it myself while he watched and stood ready to help. He was watching me now as I opened the first packet of raisins. "Hey," he cried, grabbing my left wrist. "What's happened to your hand?" "It's nothing," I said, clenching the fist. He made me open it up. The long scarlet mark lay across my palm like a burn. Who did it? Was it Captain Lancaster? "Yes, Dad, but it's nothing." "What happened?" He was gripping my wrist so hard it almost hurt. "Tell me exactly what happened." I told him everything. He stood there holding my wrist, his face going whiter and whiter, and I could see the fury beginning to boil up dangerously inside him. "I'll kill him," he softly whispered when I'd finished. "I swear I'll kill him." His eyes were blazing, and all the colour had gone from his face. I'd never seen him look like that before. "Forget it, Dad." "I will not forget it," he said. "You did nothing wrong, and he had absolutely no right to do this to you." "So he called you a cheat, did he?" I nodded. He'd taken the jacket from the peg on the wall and was putting it on. "Where are you going?" I asked. "I'm going straight to Captain Lancaster's house, and I'm going to beat the daylights out of him." "No," I cried, catching hold of his arm. "Don't do it, Dad, please. It won't do any good. Please don't do it." "I've got to," he said. "No," I cried, tugging at his arm. "It'll ruin everything. It'll only make it worse. Please forget it." He hesitated then. I held on to his arm. He was silent. I could see the rush of anger slowly draining out of his face. It's revolting, he said. I'll bet they did it to you when you were at school, I said. Of course they did. And I'll bet your dad didn't go rushing off to beat the daylights out of the teacher who did it. He looked at me but kept quiet. He didn't, did he, Dad? No, Danny, he didn't, he answered softly. I let go of his arm and helped him off with his jacket and hung it back on the peg. I'm going to put the raisins in now, I said. And don't forget that tomorrow I have a nasty cold and I won't be going to school. Yes, he said. That's right. We've got 200 raisins to fill, I said. Ah, he said. So we have. I hope we'll get them done in time, I said. Does it still hurt, he asked, that hand? No, I said. Not one bit. I think that satisfied him, and although I saw him glancing occasionally at my palm during the rest of the afternoon and evening, he never mentioned the subject again. That night he didn't tell me a story. He sat on the edge of my bunk, and we talked about what was going to happen the next day up in Hazel's Wood. He got me so steamed up and excited about it, I couldn't get to sleep. I think he must have got himself steamed up almost as much, because after he'd undressed and climbed into his own bunk, I heard him twisting and turning all over the place. He couldn't get to sleep either. At about 10:30, he climbed out of his bunk and put the kettle on. What's the matter, Dad? Nothing, he said. Shall we have a midnight feast? Yes, let's do that. He lit the lamp in the ceiling and opened a tin of tuna and made a delicious sandwich for each of us. Also, hot chocolate for me and tea for him. Then we started talking about the pheasants and about Hazel's Wood all over again. It was pretty late before we got to sleep. That's the end of chapter 12, and tomorrow we'll begin chapter 13, which is called Friday.